I think we're a society where we take a pill for everything, to lose weight, to get rid of a headache. Whatever you need a pill for, it's there.
Everybody's got them. You can go to anybody's house and look in the bathroom and there's something.
It's a big problem in the state of Tennessee. Last year we were the #1 state with prescription drug abuse. That's really sad.
We see deaths. In fact, it's one of the leading causes of death is prescription drug overdose.
So many times I've heard now when people say, you know, he was such a good boy till he got on them drugs.
I knew that prescription drug abuse, was possible. That's something that people do. I guess I was like most mothers. I never thought it would come into my home.
The misuse of prescription drugs. It's a growing problem, and some states are just starting to address it. But in Tennessee, they've been dealing with the problem for years. The state's population of almost 6 million makes it our nation's 16th largest state, but until recently, it held the unwanted title of the state with the highest number of prescriptions per resident. With that came a large number of prescription drug addictions and deaths. Leaders in the counter drug field in Tennessee have some experience dealing with prescription drug abuse, and people in the rest of the nation might be able to learn from their experience.
Over the decade of the 90s, the late 80s and early 90s, there was a very clear increase in prescription drug use. The secular trend was increasing. That's not different really than any other state. What was different was the magnitude of use, the overall magnitude of use, which was much greater than the other states on the average. Tennessee's rate is around 17 prescriptions per resident per year. The average in the U.S. is a little bit over 11, so it's substantially high. Different parts of the state see different trends. It seems to be higher in the east. In rural areas, it's a little bit higher. And then the type of drug that's used is different in different parts of the state.
Tennessee has always been ranked very high, if not the highest, in the use of prescription narcotics. I don't know if that's the geography, I don't know the mindset of all of those people, but I do know that we seem to have more than our share of pain clinics where someone can, if you can get your money up on the top of the counter, then you can get you a prescription.
What has stayed on a constant rise that I've been on for many, many years is after alcohol, we like our pills. Whether you're an adult, whether you're an old person, whether you're a young person, 1 in 3 people in Knox County are taking a narcotic or mind-altering prescription.
We have had over 80 overdose deaths in Roane County since November of 2003 because of prescription drug abuse. So, it's something that we really need to focus on.
Many people don't think they can die from taking a prescription drug. After all, a doctor prescribes it, but that's far from the truth. Drug users are no longer dying on the streets with track marks and needles. They're dying from popping pills.
The number of deaths attributed to prescription drug use and misuse is rising every year at a dramatic rate. In comparison to a relatively steady rate, slightly increasing though for illicit drugs. It was just a few years ago that the numbers of prescription drug deaths exceeded those from drugs like heroin and cocaine.
So what drugs are we talking about? You've probably heard some of the brand names, Xanax, Oxycontin, Vicodin, but the prescription problem involves much more than those popular drugs. The most abused categories of drugs are pain relievers, stimulants, sedatives, and tranquilizers, but any prescription drug can be abused. And if combined with other drugs and substances, the results can be tragic.
I'd say most people, especially young, naive people, do not understand the dangers of these drugs. When you mix even small doses of an opioid and a benzodiazepine, you can get synergism. So rather than 1 + 1 is 2, the effect may be like 3 or 4. So it's an exaggeration of the effect. So that can result in severe toxicity, coma, and death.
The people who abuse the pills don't seem to be aware of the dangers.
I didn't think that you could die off of it. I didn't think there was any repercussion out of mixing drugs. And I was sadly mistaken. that mixing methadone and Xanax will kill you. It's a deadly concoction. Unfortunately, so many of us are mixing those. I know I did it myself. I mixed Xanax and pain pills, and it'll slow your heart rate down and kill you. I mixed a high dosage of methadone and Xanax together, and the rest I don't remember. The rest was all told to me. And I was rushed to the emergency room, and I woke up in the hospital many days later. And luckily I'm here to tell the story. Unfortunately, many of my friends are not. They were able to find my heart rate, and they were able to resuscitate me.
No longer are people traveling to seedy street corners for their drugs. Prescriptions are all too easy to get.
It's in your face. You don't have to go look for it. And as a society, I think, we are a medicated society, in my opinion. There's just some sort of acceptance to it in that, and you don't necessarily feel like a drug addict if you're on prescription drugs.
I think these prescription drugs, again, are widely perceived by young folks, the high school kids and older, initially as safe drugs. My mom takes them for her, her hysterectomy surgery. She has them in the cabinet, and she only used 3 or 4 of them. They're just sitting there. So if my mom takes them, they've got to be safe. It's not like heroin. It's not like crack cocaine. So they start that way. And the problem is that you don't know, as an addicted, who's an addictive personality or who's not. But it's pretty clear that somewhere between 1 in 10 of patients or people that get a hold of these drugs develop a dependence on these drugs. And all of a sudden they can't stop, and they're looking for a better high, a better drug.
I guess I'm like everybody else. Gosh, the doctor gave me these hydrocodone, and that's so much different than going into the back alley and buying some rock cocaine. It's the spin, the feel of the prescription narcotics is so much different from the illicit drugs that we're having to change our mindset, and it's difficult, and we've not done a very good job of it. I know when I first started prosecuting in 1976, we would say that probably half of the people we would deal with, if you looked at the root cause of the criminal problem, it would involve drugs and/or alcohol. Today, it will be approaching 100% of the people we see on a daily basis. If you look deep enough into their dilemma, it is caused by drugs and alcohol. Now, I believe now that prescription narcotics are probably moving into the forefront on the people that we're seeing, in particular the hydrocodone and the OxyContin, literally breaking our back now.
We see more drug abuse than we used to see, and the type of drug abuse has changed. It used to be heroin, crack cocaine, and those kind of drugs, which most of us would perceive as street drugs. We see more prescription drugs now than we ever did before. There is this thought that, a drug addict is shooting drugs, and IV drug abuse, has a certain culture associated with it. Many of those patients look disheveled. They don't look particularly healthy, quite frankly. They don't look like folks that you would leave your kids with. The type of drug abuser that we see looks like, the run-of-the-mill kid. It looks they could have a tie on. They could have a nice dress on. They could be very well mannered. So yes, it really has changed a great deal.
I just think that a lot of our youth and some of our elderly people feel like that prescription drugs were prescribed by doctors, and they think that those drugs won't hurt them. And they have this false sense of security that it's okay to take, whatever's been prescribed by a doctor or even more than what the prescription actually tells them to take.
We do all the phone referrals in our community, and actually for several counties outside, for people calling, trying to access services and get some assistance. And we track those phone calls. And I finally got one day where I said, doesn't anyone do crack anymore? Doesn't anyone smoke pot? I mean, every single person that we saw. We have about 3,000 assessments in a database that we do for the courts. It's drugs. It was pills, and it was pills one after another. They may have had another drug use with it, or alcohol usually, but what I saw everywhere I turned was prescription drug abuse.
When people call, we take detailed information from the gender of the caller to the gender of the treatment client or the person they're calling about. We take their age, we take the reason for their call, we take the drug that they have been abusing, whether they have insurance, whether the reason for their call is court ordered, if someone referred them to us, so that we can most effectively give them the line of help that they need, but also so that we can monitor our community as well. It's helpful to us because we don't have a continuous survey of adults in our community. It's difficult for us to gauge prevalence of use among adults, and with the keeping track of the phone records, we can have heart data at our fingertips.
My perception, because of working in the emergency department, is that we're not very aware of the extent of the problem. I think that's changing, but I think we have a long way to go educationally to make providers aware of just how big a problem it is.
We hear the message often, talk to your kids about drugs, and many parents do. Some of those parents say they'll know if their children are abusing illegal drugs like marijuana, but all too often people find out too late about prescription drug trouble in their family.
I think kids, I guess glamorize might be a good word for it. I think they have the impression because it is prescribed by a doctor, it can't hurt you. Why would a doctor give this to anyone if it can hurt them? I don't think they understand where they may be less likely to stick a needle in their arm or you know, smoke crack or what they would consider a street drug. This is prescription medication. It's got to be pure. It can't hurt you. It's a misconception of the dangers with the youth, I believe. I knew that prescription drug abuse, you know, was possible. That's something that people do. I guess I was like most mothers. I never thought it would come into my home. When you have a beautiful, bright, talented child with, you know, a great future ahead of them, you don't imagine they can be here one day and gone the next. He was a typical teenager and kept us on our toes. Really, the biggest problem we ever had with Clayton was the speeding tickets and such. Typical teenager with the lead foot. I honestly thought if he was going to lose his life, it would be in a car accident. I would have never imagined he would lose it in the way that he did. He, the last day is like forever embedded in my mind. It's odd how you remember everything down to the exact minute, but it was 10:27 when he walked in the door and came upstairs, and he was tired. You know, his feet were hurting from working and being at school all day, and he got a glass of chocolate milk and sat in the chair across the living room from us, and we talked briefly, and then he picked his cat up and had his chocolate milk in his other hand and said, "Good night, Mom, I love you, I'll see you in the morning," and headed downstairs to bed, and that was the last words he ever spoke to me. When I got up the next morning to get him ready for school, I found him in his bed. He had consumed, it's a Duragesic brand of a pain patch that contains the fentanyl, and he had consumed the pain patch. I've learned since that the opiates slow your respiratory system. And of all the times you go into your baby's room when they're little to make sure they're breathing, you know, I guess all moms have this fear of their baby not breathing. I would have never thought at the age of 17 that I needed to check that night to see if he was breathing. He simply forgot to breathe. And at that time, I had never even heard of the drug fentanyl. I've heard of prescription drug abuse in both adults and youth, especially within our community. It's tremendous, but for him to lose his life from a drug that I had never even heard of, it's devastating. It's devastating that he lost his life, period. But I had no knowledge that this drug even existed, and it was the demon that came in my home and took my son from me. A friend gave it to him for recreational purposes. After his passing, we discovered that a number of his friends were using prescription pain medication for recreational purposes. Clayton had stayed after school for 2 hours the very day he passed away to study for a test he had the next morning. If he had any idea that was going to kill him, he would not have wasted 2 hours studying for a test to take the next morning. He didn't want to die. He didn't know that would happen to him through this. That's why we try to educate kids what can happen. Clayton loved life. He wanted to live. And if he'd have known this could have taken his life, he would have never done that. I know Clayton's death was not in vain. He died for a reason. Since he wanted to become a school teacher, Clayton's lesson through his death ended up being drugs kill. So even though Clayton is not here with us today, his lesson is still teaching others to not use. I just wish there was a way I could reach out to more people and teach them that lesson and remind them of the tragedies that can occur due to prescription drug abuse. You've got to prevent them from starting to prevent them from dying. And that's the bottom line, is just don't start it. Just don't go there. Lock up, hide, otherwise secure your prescription medication. Even if your child wouldn't take it or you think your child wouldn't do it, they may have a friend over that'll do it. And you just don't want them to have access to that. It could be anyone's child. That it's an equal opportunity destroyer. Well, it's devastating. A part of us is gone. It's just like a broken chain.
The abuse of legal drugs is outpacing the use of illegal ones. Recent data from the Monitoring the Future survey showed 7 of the top 10 drugs high school seniors are misusing are prescription or over-the-counter medications. A 2007 study from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration reported 5.2 million people aged 12 or older reported they used a prescription pain reliever non-medically in the past month. Many addicts say their habits began somewhat accidentally.
I found out about pills from surgery, and after that, after taking them for 2 weeks, you got high off of them, and I wasn't ready to let that go. So I went searching for them and kept using them and then taking them more.
Prescription drugs was one of the first things that I was introduced to at a very young age. I was in several car accidents, and prescription drugs were introduced to me by doctors. As soon as I was introduced to them, I wasn't aware that prescription drugs were even going to be a part of my life. When I did start using prescription drugs, they was only supposed to be for a very short time. I was still being prescribed them, but the dosage that I was being prescribed them wasn't enough for me anymore. I actually needed more of them to make it through the day. I went to other doctors and got more prescriptions to make it through the day. I needed more than 3 pills a day. I needed 6 pills a day. And that just started everything for me. I was 18 years old. I didn't know anything about pills, and I didn't know anything that didn't come with a label that says that you're going to become physically dependent on these.
They opened the gates for everything else. I went from feeling that one high to wondering what other ones were, what they were like. I'm thinking about what they would do. I had no idea. I didn't even think about the fact that I could get charged and end up in the system and be put on probation, and never thought about consequences, to pills. It made me lose focus on life. I was more or less looking for the high. I was kind of floating through life, lost track of goals, lost sight of myself, and I went from just taking the drug to only worrying about the drug. I wasn't living life for life. I was living life for the drug.
Some addicts get their drugs from doctors, others get their fix closer to home.
When we have such prevalence of narcotics or mind-altering drugs in the medicine cabinets, to know that there's such easy access, I kind of compare prescription drugs as just like alcohol. It's in the home, it's easily accessible, and we kind of approach it in the same way. To think that the youth in our community particularly have such readily access to prescription drugs, probably don't know what they're taking, and the drug interaction combination is really frightening, which is why we've seen such an increase in poisonings and overdoses and runs to our emergency rooms.
Our substance abuse in the emergency department has shown a pretty steady increase over several years. It's the point now where I think it devours a whole lot of staff time and resources that we need to be devoting to something besides substance abuse.
Oh my gosh, it's huge. It's hard to measure though. But I see kids, a lot of kids, every day that basically come in either in withdrawal or as an overdose, or they're trying to get the drugs. And what that's doing to an entire generation, I don't know how to measure that. but it's brutal, I can tell you that. And what's most difficult for me as a parent is to see the families that are in there with the kids, and they're like, you just have to help, please help my son, please help my son.
I think the perception is way off, especially with the parents. When we did the survey, the results from the kids' surveys were completely different than the adults' surveys, because the parents are just unaware of what the kids are really doing. I think they're in denial about it, or they don't know. It's one or the other. If kids are doing things and the adults in the community don't know, it's scary.
Prescription drugs shatter the image of who a drug dealer is and how to handle the crimes they commit. Sometimes it isn't easy to spot. Prescription drug crimes are often subtle and not always obvious to law enforcement officers who are more used to street crimes.
The one issue that is dealt with most is what they call doctor shopping. Doctor shopping is obtaining multiple prescriptions or overlapping prescriptions from multiple providers without the providers being aware of the other. An abuser goes to one physician on a Monday and gets a prescription for a controlled substance. Tuesday goes to another physician and gets the same prescription for a controlled substance. That's what we call doctor shopping, or providing false information to a practitioner in order to obtain a drug. It's illegal, one, because they're lying. There's a number of states that have laws, established laws, that state providing false information in an attempt to obtain a controlled substance is a crime. A lot of the states establish that as a felony crime.
Doctor shopping can sometimes be time-consuming to investigate, and many departments don't have dedicated drug diversion investigators. Instead, they rely on a team approach from pharmacists, doctors, insurance providers, and others. Internet pharmacies make it easier for people to get their prescriptions, but they don't make things easier for law enforcement. We all get the emails advertising anything we'd want, from pleasure drugs to controlled substances. Some of the solicitations are from illegitimate pharmacies, not the big name ones we see on the street. Many internet pharmacies don't require prescriptions or a doctor's visit, and that's illegal. Also, drugs ordered online might not be what they claim to be.
They will provide prescriptions that are adulterated. When you buy a prescription over the internet, if it's not a legitimate internet pharmacy, you don't know what type of product you're getting. All right, it could be adulterated, could be manufactured in another part of the world. Secondly, they may not even require a prescription. They may ship that without a doctor's authorization, without any type of documented prescription.
Back in Tennessee, no matter how people obtain their pills, their abuse often leads to problems for law enforcement and others. Drugs of all kinds and crime go hand in hand.
Well, the last 2 years, narcotics, as far as the prescription drugs, we deal with those almost on a daily basis. Our shoplifting, gas drive-offs, every crime that comes through this office, more than 95% are related to drugs in one way or another, whether it be meth or prescription medication or heroin or whatever the case may be. It's something that they're trained to look for now on traffic stops, and they know that it's out there. And if they pay attention to what's going on the stops, that these people that are users are definitely dangerous, particularly if they've had too much. And it changes their behavior, and it's very easy to see almost instantly on a traffic stop if someone's under the influence of narcotics, either by their speech that's slurred or their aggressive behavior. We see a lot of aggressive behavior of people that are using the painkillers.
I think it's a very bad effect on the county because, first off, people who do abuse drugs like that, you'll have more accidents, more theft, other crime that happens as a result tends to bring in other drugs and other drug-related activity.
We see so much of the painkillers anymore on the street. They're pretty easy to identify. The officers are pretty familiar with them. If you are taking medication that's not prescribed, it's illegal to take those narcotics. If we catch people that are in possession of it, they're charged and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And usually the first-time offenders, they know that they get off with those offenses if they're the first-time offenders. And the court system, it takes a long time to get them through the system sometimes, particularly if it's felony charges. And the criminal courts, We just don't have any room right now, to be honest with you, to put these offenders in the correctional facilities, the state facilities.
These people, I believe, will do anything to satisfy that addiction. We're not seeing quite the violence that you may see over a gram of a rock cocaine or whatever. I don't know why we wouldn't think that that's not next. It's been the history in this country is that once the supplies, the availability is diminished, then next comes violence. And I anticipate we'll see that too. So often the suppliers, and I use that in a very broad sense, could be people that love you. When you're stealing from mom and dad's medicine cabinet, you know, what are we going to do about that? You now know that Junior is stealing your prescription medication. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to call the police as the mother and prosecute your son?
They've got friends or relatives that are visiting pain clinics, or they know some doctors in the area, some local doctors that could be writing prescriptions for medication for almost anything, particularly painkillers and stuff of that nature. You know, they shop for doctors from time to time, and that's what we call that in the law enforcement fields. They jump from one doctor to the next, trying to get 30 pain pills from one doctor and then 30 from the next doctor around the corner. So we see that quite often.
We have a lot of people that seek medication, pain medications or nerve medications mainly. Some are addicted and use them themselves. Others will actually sell obtain their drugs legally and then sell them to others. We can oftentimes tell just from the questions that people ask. One thing that happens is that sometimes other physicians will catch their patients doctor shopping or selling their drugs, and they'll dismiss them from their practices. And we'll start getting calls from people, oh, Dr. So-and-so won't give me my medicines anymore, will you take me? And then we ask questions, well, what type of medicines and why? And then just cut it off right there.
Well, the more pain pills they get, naturally, the more that they can sell on the street, and they can support their habit plus make money off of it to buy more. And it just keeps rolling, a snowball effect, and gets out of control.
There's a great deal of resistance for anybody to admit whether they're an alcoholic or an abuser of prescription drugs, to basically say, hey, you know what, I got a problem. That's a hard thing for people to come to grips with. And we address that on a daily basis in our emergency department. We will say to somebody, hey, you know, I have some concerns about your utilization of medicine right now.
The cost of doctor shopping and other prescription drug-related crimes can be enormous, and not just in terms of addiction and drug abuse. Money matters too. Taxpayer-funded programs often suffer, and Tennessee is trying to do something about it.
TennCare is a continuation of the Medicaid program here in Tennessee. I head up our drug diversion team with the state of Tennessee through the Office of Inspector General. We have 8 nurses that work on the team, and we do drug diversion cases for people who have that are committing TennCare fraud. We investigate the recipients, enrollees on the TennCare program, and then also we do some preliminary investigations with providers, pharmacists, nurses, anyone that might come in contact with prescription drugs and diversion of those drugs. And we've come today to talk to you about what we are trying to do with TennCare fraud. We have a very good working relationship with local law enforcement and also hospitals, doctors, nurses. We try to visit other counties and pharmacists, doctor groups, you know, anyone that will have us come in, because we feel that one of our big parts is to save tax dollars, is to educate the public about this problem. Our goals are to try to arrest and prosecute people that are doing any kind of TennCare fraud. Our main arrests have been involving drugs and drug diversion, drug seeking, doctor shopping. Anyone in the state of Tennessee can call the hotline, and we try to, you know, get that number out to everyone in Tennessee. We have posters with that number. Every time we go out and speak to any group, we take our posters for for people to hang up. We send them to every doctor and pharmacist in Tennessee. Thankfully, most of the community is so outraged with TennCare fraud, whether it be drugs or otherwise, when the TennCare program, again, because we are taxpayers and we're funding the program, usually they're pretty good to call. We have thousands of cases. We have 8 nurses currently that work in our drug diversion unit. We have the ability to hire 1 more, but we could probably use 15 and still, we're swimming in a sea of cases. And we're thankful that the community wants to be that involved, the state wants to be that involved to give us those tips and those complaints.
Some private insurers are also collecting data in hopes of reducing their costs and preventing people from becoming hooked on prescription drugs.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Tennessee has been interested in the use of health care and prescription drugs for a long time. Obviously, for its core business, health insurance, the use of those services and products are very important. We want to try to make sure that our members use them appropriately and effectively. And so, to that end, we developed an interest in exactly how those services and products were being used around the state. And as a consequence, we have spent some time looking at utilization patterns geographically. As a consequence, we've produced several reports related to the utilization of health care and prescription drugs. Our members have prescription drug coverage with us, and in order for them to purchase a prescription drug using Blue Cross and Blue Shield health insurance benefits, a claim is filed. And the filed claim contains all of the information that we need to do the kinds of analyses that are reflected in the white papers that we've reported on. We have been seeing the health and social consequences for some time. What's happening now is that all of the organizations that collect healthcare data are now thinking about how their data can be looked at so that you can make benefit of it in instances where healthcare is a detriment as well as a benefit.
Prescription and over-the-counter medications treat legitimate medical conditions and are safe and effective when used as directed. Making sure patients who need them get them and keeping pills out of the hands of diverters and abusers is a challenge.
Probably maybe one of the few people in the field that wants to be very clear on that line, because I do not believe or want in any way for narcotic prescriptions to be taken away from those that truly have a medical need for them. And I think that's very important for us to make that stance. There are many in our country in the same type of position that have worked on this issue who've not been able to get players on board, and that's the factor I notice that's the difference between the stance I have taken and theirs of all is bad, all is bad. Where it is medically needed and necessary, drugs are a very good thing and should be there, and I hope if I'm ever dying that they are there to treat my pain. So I want to be very clear, we don't even go after all prescription drugs. We're talking about just the abuse, just the illegal diversion.
Well, I think there has to be a certain reluctance to issue pain medication, simply because you've got people coming in and, is this a legitimate complaint or is this not a legitimate complaint? I don't think any of the physicians want to be in a position where they're fostering any activities that would lead to substance abuse. So there is some modification of the thought process. I think they'll step back and do a little thinking before they'll issue a narcotic.
There's no test that I have for pain, but certainly if you come in and you have a broken leg, I know that stuff hurts, and those patients deserve all the pain medicines in the world. Interestingly enough, some of those patients don't necessarily complain of pain, but I want to make sure that we treat those people appropriately. It's very difficult for me to determine whether you have legitimate pain or not legitimate pain. Obviously, if you have a broken bone, if you have swelling, if you have some skin changes that suggest a significant injury, obviously we perceive that as being legitimate pain. If you don't have that stuff, I still want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I really want to make sure that, you know, I treat you as if you have legitimate pain, but it's when you come back and you come back again. All emergency physicians, all physicians are under pressure to provide pain relief. You cannot come into the emergency department as a patient without getting a pain assessment scale, you know, done by a triage nurse. That's one of the first things that's done along with your vital signs. And we are under pressure to address patients' pain needs. And frankly, we haven't always done that really well. It's when we see repetitive, you know, behaviors where the patients keep coming back for the same or different vague pain syndromes that we begin to become concerned and worried that there's something else going on besides legitimate pain.
And I think that's the saddest thing about prescription drug abuse is a lot of these people really have had a legitimate illness or surgery, something that caused them to need a pain medication, and unfortunately they became addicted, or they realized, you know, how easy that it was possibly to make money.
I think kids look for them with the intent to abuse the drugs, and adults generally just accidentally become addicted and then end up with a problem.
Once the addiction takes hold, an addict will do almost anything to get the drugs they crave.
I couldn't find them. I would go to the emergency room and complain of back pain, as if I hurt myself and had like a lumbar sprain or something. I would just tell the ER staff I had back pain, manipulate, whatever, pay for it, whatever had to be done.
And it was easy to go to different doctors and not even have MRIs or anything. I went to doctors that just said, "What do you need?" and just took out a script pad and just wrote me whatever I needed. As that became easier, it became easier to get whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted to. It didn't matter anymore because the doctors made it so accessible for me. And it wasn't just me that was doing it, it was everybody that I know.
I do remember the only time a doctor questioned what I was doing is when I had a tonsillectomy. They were giving me hydrocodone in liquid form because it was hard to swallow. And I was in so much pain that I wasn't taking the tablespoon or whatever it was as prescribed. I was drinking it like it was nothing. And I went through a bottle quicker than what I was supposed to, but the doctor still called into the pharmacy and had them give me yet another bottle, which I was okay with at the time, but there was never really any question. I got yelled at, but they still gave me more pain medication.
So what can we do about the problem of prescription drug abuse? Well, it takes work on all fronts, from doctors to pharmacists to law enforcement to you and me.
The state of Tennessee has established a prescription drug registry where they feed all controlled prescriptions filled at pharmacies across the state for controlled substances into a central database. And this database looks for people that are going to multiple doctors. So that's made some impact. Many times you'll see a patient that's asking for large amounts of pain medicines that just does not go along with their symptoms. And by going into this database, you can see if they've gotten something similar from another physician within a short period of time. Tennessee has actually enacted a new law which makes it a felony to doctor shop and obtain multiple prescriptions fraudulently.
There's an online site that I as provider can get a password to get into, and if I provide my reasons for doing that, and it sounds a little bit difficult to do, but it takes me all of 100 seconds to enter into the website with the patient's name and birth date and find out what their utilization of scheduled narcotic type medicines is. This database that's out there on patients, you know, is available to the physicians. The sad thing is that a lot of physicians, the majority of physicians, have not signed up for this database and don't utilize it. Every place in the state of Tennessee, and it's relatively up to date. Anecdotally, I mean, I've seen about a week lag from when somebody gets a prescription filled to when it actually is available online. But it's really accurate.
It's a controlled substance database that the state of Tennessee allows health professionals to have access to. And it's not a policing mechanism, at least not at this point. It is just so we can do our job to take care of that patient. If it's somebody that I do not know, we ask for an ID, a picture ID. Of course, we want to know their address, birthday. I normally don't ask them why they're taking the medication because that's pretty much a given, but that's basically it. And sometimes we come right out and tell them, you know, I have to get this approved before I can fill it. And they'll come right when the doctor's office have already closed, and in the evening, we see it more in the evening when we can't check right then, so we have to have them to wait till the next day. We all try to check it out. I mean, if we've got it right in our hand, I mean, we feel compelled to check it out. And If we can't get it verified, I mean, it usually goes back to them. But you know, if we find out that it is a bad prescription, I mean, next step, call the police.
And the local pharmacies here in the county have been real good about sharing information with us about people that forge prescriptions in our area. They pretty much give us the information that we need to prosecute these cases. If it wasn't for the partnership, we would not be successful in doing what we're doing, because it's a daily problem combating drugs.
Most of the time, I think when it's somebody that's trying to get something fake, that they'll walk off. I have had one or two that, you know, just keeps on, tries to intimidate you, and that's when I have to say, I have to call the police.
The way people in positions of power look at it is they continue to focus on illicit drugs, and I worry we're not paying near enough attention to the real problem, and that's prescription drugs. Seldom do you see with the law enforcement with vials of pills, unlike bales of cocaine or marijuana, and guns and cash that we all see in our newspaper with law enforcement beaming that we've seized this. I've not seen one that we've got 15 prescription bottles lined up and the sheriff or the chief of police talking about. I think training and discussion is the best way that I know to go about it and to change the mindset, not only of law enforcement, but of everybody.
One of the first times I ever got caught, as far as by somebody trying to forge one, is it was set up. This guy come in, he had a big bandage on his face, you know, and said he just had surgery and wanted to know if I wanted to see where he had surgery. I'm like, no. And the next evening, he comes in with a Demerol prescription, and of course, he had to get it verified, so it was out of Knoxville, so I called the number on the script pad, got it verified. Well, come to find out, another pharmacist had an uneasy feeling about him, and had actually sent him to us because we had the medication. And it was they were at a motel with answering the phone there. They had changed the phone number. So now I don't go by that phone number on the prescription anymore. I call information or get a phone book out.
There are few communities in this country that have dedicated prescription drug diversion agents or law enforcement working on that issue. And the prescription drugs has just not been where they've seen the largest, problem so far.
As we've seen, figuring out someone has a prescription drug problem isn't easy. For medical professionals, that's only the first step. Deciding whether or not to confront someone is a difficult choice.
It's much easier for me to write you a prescription for narcotics and go on to see the next patient than to engage in a conversation that is often, there's a conflict there. You want something, I don't want to provide this because I'm worried about you, and it's likely that neither one of us are going to be particularly happy. It's so much easier for me as a provider to just write the prescription and go on to the next patient, because I'm being monitored on my use of pain medications, I'm being monitored on patient satisfaction. I want you to be satisfied as a patient, and I think that's a good thing. But I think we need to basically, number one, provide the highest quality care possible, and sometimes that means not giving a narcotic prescription to the patient that wants a narcotic prescription. I like to think, and I believe sincerely, that most of us as providers, we want to provide the best care we possibly can. But we need information, we need education. And and frankly, physicians are not used to being told what to do. And that's a problem. You have to be willing to engage the patient in that dialogue. That takes time. And I'm not trying to make excuses for physicians, but there's a lot of pressure on physicians for their time. And doctors are trying to create business, and having this dialogue, talking to patients or suggesting that they may have a substance abuse problem is generally not good for business, particularly docs in private practice. So there's a resistance to that from a lot of physicians. Some hate the conflict, some don't have the time, sometimes it's a combination of both. If you approach the patient, in my opinion, in a strong judgmental fashion and say, you're a drug abuser, this is your list, and I'm not going to write narcotics and you're out of there, that's not going to go well. You're not going to change that person's behavior, they're going to write nasty letters, administration is going to call you, and as an emergency physician, my job may be in jeopardy. The hospitals are very sensitive to patient satisfaction and their perception in the community. On the other hand, I think, idealistically, that if you approach the patient and say, look, I'm really concerned about your health for these reasons, and it's much easier for me to write a narcotic prescription than to not, but I think it's in your best interest for me not to write the prescription. I think that's the way, and it has hopefully kept me out of hot water. It makes me feel better at night when I go to sleep, that I'm doing the right thing.
I guess from my heart, I mean, I try to look past prejudices. I mean, there's still legal things we have to go through, but not everybody that's walking up with an OxyContin prescription is a drug addict too. So I think that we have to try to verify it and know who we're dealing with, doctor and patient. We have to keep a correct inventory, running inventory of the narcotics, and they stay under lock and key. Only the pharmacists have keys, and it's double counted. We have at least 2 people counting when we do the prescription, sometimes 3.
Locally, we've worked with very heavily with the medical community. We started maybe 7 or 8 years ago doing training for brief screening and intervention with all the university hospitals. We particularly focused on the family physician and the OBGYN units, thinking that maybe we can't change how physicians are already practicing in the community, but if we can get the medical residents coming out, knowing what to do and how to practice and being a little more knowledgeable, that we would get ahead of the game plan.
The prevention field is ever changing and always adapting. As we've heard, it isn't just about pot and coke anymore. The Metropolitan Drug Commission in Tennessee created a middle school curriculum called Red Flags, designed to teach the signs of prescription drug abuse.
What does the word red flags mean to you? If I said, Paul, tell me what red flags mean to you, what would you tell me? We were given last year a program put together by the Metropolitan Drug Commission called Red Flags. And in that program, there are videos, PowerPoint presentation, activities, and I have used that the last 2 years, and it's worked very well to relate to the students. They're a little shocked at first because they've not thought about prescription drugs really being a problem. Marijuana seems to be the drug that is most prevalent in their age group. And when we talk about prescription drugs, it's kind of an eye-opening experience for them because they've not ever thought about that being a problem. I mean, it's just something that mom takes when you're sick or you take when you're sick, and never thought about really abusing those types of drugs. We have very little time at school to research different projects. I know I have duties that I have to do before school during lunch. So my planning time is very limited, and I have 3 different preparations. So when I have something given to me that's actually usable in the classroom, it makes it so much easier on me as a teacher. I did not have to do anything. I did not have to do anything as far as getting the information, accumulating the information. It was all right there in the packet that they gave us. The pre-test was pre-printed. The lesson plans were already there. The activities were already done, which I liked. The toolkit lays it out in a 3-day session. It has a PowerPoint presentation that goes along with each day. It has activities that the kids do. We have the video, and then we have group work where they divide up, and each group takes a character that was somehow involved in seeing the danger signs that the young lady was demonstrating. And so they have to think about what did that person see and what should that person have done. It has a pre-test and a post-test. It has other activities that we get to do collectively as a class as well as individually. So it just lays a path for you to follow for 3 days.
Hey Mom, what are you doing here? I thought Aunt Sarah was taking you to the doctor this afternoon.
She had to go to work. You can take me tomorrow afternoon, right?
No, I can't. Tomorrow is final tryouts.
Oh, I forgot about that.
The video was actually filmed here in Knoxville. It portrays a young lady that's a cheerleader in high school and how she has gotten addicted to prescription drugs from her mother. And she was stealing them from her mom.
I'll make the next one, I swear.
Just call me when you get home, okay?
And it keys in on several people in her life and the signs that were given to each one of those that they failed to recognize or they recognized and did nothing about. I think we're a society where we take a pill for everything, to lose weight, to get rid of a headache, to whatever you need a pill for, it's there. And so for them, the fact that they're taking pills is not something that's unusual for them because they have it in they see it in their home, they have it themselves. Some of them have been taking medication since they were small for health issues that they have. But it brought home the fact that type of drug can be abused and misused. I would say probably 80% of them never thought that they should not take a drug that was not prescribed for them because they probably had a drug given to them for a headache or upset stomach or something that was prescribed for someone else. And so I think it opened their eyes to the fact that that's something that you do not want to do. I have had some students approach me about students that they knew were bringing prescription drugs to school and handing them out to the students. I have been pleasantly surprised at their response. I've had them write a letter to our principal explaining in the first paragraph what they learned, in the second paragraph what they enjoyed doing, and then in the last paragraph why they appreciated him allowing us to do the program. And it's been very eye-opening at the things that they've said, things that they picked up on that I had no idea they were even thinking about.
The Metropolitan Drug Commission has a new internet-based curriculum to teach 7th, 8th, and 9th graders about the harm misused prescription drugs can cause. The coalition is not only putting together lessons for students, they're targeting their community approach for maximum impact.
We are often asked by key leaders in our community to prove that we are making a difference, and by all of the indicators that we are tracking and all of the data that we collect, we feel like it is easy to make the argument that we are making an effective difference in our community. When people have the right information, I think we can make dynamic decisions on our programming and evaluating our programs. If a program is not working, we don't want to continue it in its current form. We want to change the problem or change the program altogether to make sure that it is operating at maximum effectiveness.
We continually mine the data. We've done a lot of training in the community. We work a lot with our drug-free workplace programs and trying to make them aware. Most of the drug-free workplace programs that we do training for were not panel testing for prescription drugs. And a lot of the construction businesses and manufacturing businesses that we work with have changed their policies so that they are panel screening for those drugs as well once they became aware of the prevalence in the community. Working with pharmacies, we just launched programs in our school system, particularly focused on trying to address prescription drug abuse. Your media campaign, your social issues. We've got a couple PSAs that have been running. Did a series of 6 different stories on the 6 o'clock news last year on prescription drugs. We're trying to hit it from about every way we can.
I think that we have made a huge difference, and I think we've opened the eyes of a lot of people that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I think that people are starting to respect the fact that prescription drugs are dangerous. I think we've made a big difference, and we're going to continue to make a difference. We do a lot of education and try to increase awareness, and I think that's the most important thing that we can do, because if people don't know, then they don't know. So, we want to try to educate people and make sure that they know that prescription drug abuse is dangerous and it can kill you.
As we've said, Tennessee isn't the only place where prescription drugs are a problem. They're everywhere. There are some things you can do around the house for your family. Secure all of your prescriptions. Keep an eye on how many pills you have in a bottle so you'll know if some are missing.
They don't leave them laying around in a purse or in an open medicine cabinet. Keep them under lock and key, just like you would a gun, because in the end, they're just about as deadly.
Talk to your kids. Explain prescriptions are drugs and can be as dangerous as taking illicit drugs.
Education is important to get that information out so we can tell our young people that abusing these drugs, misusing these drugs, can lead to death.
Don't take any medication a doctor did not prescribe to you, and tell your doctor about any medications you are taking, even over-the-counter ones and herbal supplements. They can interact badly with each other, often causing lethal results.
Even if you're seeing a psychiatrist, a pain doctor, and an internist for a whole variety of medical reasons, you should share all of your medications with all the physicians so they understand the potentials for drug interactions.
Dispose of any medications properly. Don't just throw the bottles in the trash with leftover pills in them. Some communities have prescription drug drop-offs, but there are strict guidelines for those, so not all communities have them. Everyone needs to be a part of the solution to the prescription drug abuse problem. Parents need to know the latest trends, kids need to be aware of the dangers, doctors must prescribe appropriately, law enforcement must enforce the laws. Well, you get the picture. It takes awareness and education. To help you along the path, here are some internet resources you might want to check out. Thanks for watching Not What the Doctor Ordered. Thank you.